Am I a person? Spoiler, yes. But what does the law say about this? Because this is something we see crop up a lot. There's a certain argument out there, that person only means corporations, bodies incorporate. However, I can tell you now, that's just wrong. And there's a very, very sad case that illustrates that. So let me explain. There was a woman, and she was involved with an organisation that was very sort of this OPCA thing, organised pseudo-legal commercial arguments. And there were problems at home, and her child was taken into care. So she applied for a writ of habeas corpus. A writ of habeas corpus, that literally means show us the body or bring forth the body. It's a very ancient form of action, and it was originally designed for when people went missing in detention or something, your friend suddenly gets seized by the authorities. You could apply to court with a writ of habeas corpus. Anybody can bring this, either the person themselves, although that might be impractical if we don't know where they are, but somebody can bring this on behalf of that person. And they apply for the writ and they go to court, and if they are successful, the court says, okay, bring that person, produce that person so we can see, first of all, they're still okay, and also you need to explain why you have detained them or seized them. So she brought this writ in the family court, but her argument was rather an interesting one. Well, I'll say her argument. She was represented by a, quote, Mackenzie friend. And just to explain, a Mackenzie friend, the law allows people to be accompanied. If they're unrepresented, they can be accompanied by somebody called a Mackenzie friend after a divorce case, Mackenzie and Mackenzie. And the role of a Mackenzie friend is they can sit there, provide moral support, take notes, they can suggest courses of action, they can suggest questions, but they don't have rights of audience themselves. They're not allowed to actually take part in the proceedings, unless sometimes courts actually, if it's a very sensible Mackenzie friend and they can see that they're really assisting and the person's really struggling, there have been occasions where courts have said, you know what, actually, yeah, you can effectively act as their advocate, because a court can grant rights of audience to any particular person, even if they don't actually have statutory rights of audience. So the argument was this. The child had been taken into care under the Children Act. And the Children Act says it permits the court to make child arrangement orders with respect to children. This includes orders relating to with whom a child will live, spend time, or otherwise have contact. So it's a very wide-reaching power. And in legislation, under the Children's Act 1989, a child is defined of a person under the age of 18. So it's a child is a person. But her argument was that says, well, the Interpretation Act 1978, that actually says person includes a body of persons, corporate or unincorporate. So what's a corporate body? A corporate body is a company, an incorporated company. Incorporation means to give something a body. What's an unincorporated body? That's things like a partnership or a social club, something like that, where it's a group of people that it's convenient to refer to by another name, like, PricewaterhouseCoopers is a partnership, but actually it doesn't have an independent legal existence on its own. A corporation is what we call a legal person, as opposed to a natural person. And that means that the corporation can enter into contracts, on its own right. It can sue or be sued. It actually has an independent existence. With partnerships, that's not quite the same. It's just a convenient way of dealing with a bunch of individuals. Although I have to say, there have been cases where partnerships have been treated as independent entities. I actually was involved in a case that actually set out some of the law on that. I mean, it can get quite interesting. Say you've got your local social club and you own like a minivan collectively between you, and there's a penalty. Who actually pays that penalty? Who do they prosecute? It all gets quite complicated. But in this particular case, her argument was, well, it says there, person includes a body of persons corporate or unincorporated. It doesn't say anything about actual humans. So it's the definition, effectively, of include. So, I mean, I can tell you now, the position is, include there means as well as, not only. But the court, obviously they wanted to treat this woman sensitively, so they sort of went through all this. And they referred to something called Benyon, Bailey and Norbury on Statutory Interpretations, the 8th edition. And that states, in relation to the definition of person, while the definition appearing in Interpretation Acts makes it clear that person includes bodies of persons, they do not otherwise affect the width of the term, which must therefore be given its ordinary meaning. Acts are normally drafted on the basis that person covers companies and other bodies as well as natural persons. The definition in the Interpretation Act makes it unnecessary to mention companies or other bodies specifically on each occasion, unless there is something about the context that could be taken to indicate a contrary intention. So in other words, it's just saying there, the Interpretation Act sets out all sorts of things. It's the classic one where it says, any reference to man includes woman and any reference to woman includes man unless it says something to the contrary. The idea is it's just to simplify the interpretation of statutes. So whenever, a statute refers to a person, you can imply that it also includes a corporation. Now, obviously, that's not always going to be the case. I mean, the Offences Against the Persons Act, 1861, you might have a massive row with your bank, but you can't really go around there and punch the bank. You can only, punch a natural person. But when it comes to other things, like, a person commits an offence if they allow, pollution or an environmental nuisance, well, obviously, that sort of thing, that includes corporations as well. So that's how they actually said it. They said basically, we just start with the ordinary definition of the word. And this had actually cropped up in another case. This was one called Savage and Savage, which was another sort of family-related thing. It's what we call a Talata claim, which is all sort of like law of trusts and all sorts of nonsense like that I barely understand. But basically they said the judge was correct in carrying out this exercise. There is a presumption, or more accurately a starting point, that Parliament intended the words used to have their grammatical meaning. As Lord Nichols put in Spath Home, an appropriate starting point is that the language is taken to bear its ordinary meaning in the general context of the statute. And like I say, this is something I've mentioned before in relation to all that unlawful, illegal thing. It's very, very common for courts to say, look, when we're looking at words, we just use the standard dictionary definition unless it has a specific legal meaning. I mean, some words do have very weird specific legal meanings, and because they're sort of frozen in time at the time that the relevant legislation was passed or the relevant case law gave some guidance or some interpretation on that. That's why we have at least 3 different meanings of malice, because the meaning has changed over time. I mean, if you say to most people, what does malice mean? They say, well, it means acting, with an animus against somebody. But in defamation, for instance, it means acting not knowing that something's not true or not caring. In malicious wounding, it has a meaning of, akin to recklessness. Malicious wounding sounds really bad, but it's actually a lot less serious than wounding with intent, because malicious wounding is, you're just flailing around and you I say accidentally hit somebody. An accident would be an offence, but you take a risk by flailing your arms around, an unnecessary risk, and you knock somebody. Then in that case, you've acted maliciously, but you didn't act intentionally. You weren't actually intending to cause that sort of harm. So this is the starting point. We just look at the dictionary definition. And the thing to remember about dictionaries is, as we say in this country, they are descriptive, not prescriptive. Dictionaries in England and indeed America, they just list a word as most people use it. Unlike, say, France, for instance, where actually they are prescriptive and they say, no, this is what the word means. They have an academy over there that defines what words means. But in this particular case, it was very, very clear. They said, no, Person just means person. Yes, because we introduced this idea of incorporation. At some stage, I'll have to look at how incorporation came around, because there's a very good argument that the concept of incorporating companies actually originated in Cornwall with something called the cost book companies, which is a way that people chip together to engage in tin mining. And what's really nice there is the members were called adventurers. And we still have a bit of a, a remnant to that today, because we still talk about joint ventures, don't we? So, but I quite like the idea that instead of just being a member of the company or a shareholder, I would have been an adventurer. But yeah, it's just, the only reason that people get hung up on this is, yes, there is something that says person includes corporations or unincorporated bodies, unless it specifically says it doesn't. But includes doesn't mean only. It means as well as. And that was the ruling in this case. So the judge said, well, your argument that your daughter is not a person is just one that doesn't wash. I mean, then having established that, that's it, they went, yes, she is, subject to the Children's Act because children are young persons. And then they actually looked into all the other stuff. And in all fairness, they were very sympathetic, but they said the problem here is you have effectively got yourself involved in a cult. And that is causing harm to your daughter. So no, sorry. At the moment, we are going to keep her in care. But there you go. So next time you see people say, what, do you mean person or do you mean human? It's the same thing. Like I say, in law, we do talk about natural persons, i.e. humans, and we also talk about, legal persons, i.e. companies. I mean, I have a big interest in personhood generally, because of course I've got all my animal personhood arguments that I like to argue. Because my argument is, if a company can be a person, why can't an animal be a person, or indeed a tree or a landscape? Although I have to say, the last time I did make that argument, the judgment began, Mr. Robertshaw seeks to argue a cause of action unknown to English law. And Morgan Freeman voice, it is still unknown to English law. At the directions hearing, actually, the judge said, Mr. Robertshaw, this is a claim on behalf of a dog, isn't it? I said, well, actually, technically, it's a claim on behalf of the dog's estate. He said, yeah, that's not really helping. Having said that, he was wonderfully sympathetic about this point. And even though we obviously lost the case, he didn't let the other side have their costs, much to their annoyance, because he said, yeah, I can see why they brought this case. I mean, like literally, the judge brought his own dog to the hearing. So that's always a good sign. But yeah, anyway, as always, hope you found that vaguely useful, vaguely informative, vaguely accurate. I'll just keep saying once again, thanks to all the lovely comments and get well soon stuff. I am feeling a lot better. I mean, it's really weird. I actually look a lot better when I've been out to the pub. I seem to get back to normal then, but having a couple of pints before doing these videos probably wouldn't be conducive to... Actually, would it actually make any difference? I mean, it's not like they're a model of accuracy and efficiency and professionalism anyway. Maybe I should just sit here with a couple of pints of proper job.